President Trump recently finalized new rules to discourage legal immigrants and their families from using government benefits. As a result, immigrants would face new barriers to becoming permanent residents if they use programs such as Medicaid, food stamps, and housing subsidies. The changes have been opposed by many governors and mayors around the country, as well as by immigrant advocates. We'd like to welcome two of those advocates from the Lawyers for Civil Rights, staff attorney Laura Maslow-Armand and civil rights fellow Lauren Sampson. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
I want to start with Lauren. Exactly what would change if this proposal were to take effect?
As Lawyers for Civil Rights outlines in its comment to this rule, there are two striking changes. The first is that the list of benefits that can be considered if to render an individual a public charge has been expanded. Previously, DHS would look at whether you were institutionalized at the government's pay, if you were receiving SSI or TANF, and if you were receiving general assistance. Now that list has expanded to families that are receiving food stamps, non-emergency Medicaid, Section 8, and other benefits that are really core to the social safety net. The other change is that the list of heavily weighted negative factors has enlarged. Previously, if an individual could show an affidavit of support saying that they would be supported by a family member or would work in the United States, that was sufficient. Now those affidavits are treated as just one of many factors, and there are far more negative factors, including the inability to speak English, a long-term health condition without the ability to pay, or an individual being too young or too old.
Turn to Laura Maslow-Armand. The comment period for the changes has expired, but the changes have still not yet taken effect. Have you heard anything about what immigrant families are doing as far as reacting to this?
I think the main consequence is disenrolling from these benefits in a way that's probably overreaching. They may be depriving the family of assistance, monetary assistance, more than is necessary under this proposed rule. So there's disenrolling and there's a failure to enroll. I have had families who have decided to abandon the application for disability benefits for the children. They don't know what is going to be included in public charge. It's making the parents who are going to apply for a green card leery of taking any public assistance.
And what does that mean? I mean, at some point, somebody's going to have an illness in the family, and they're going to do something about it. So what does that mean?
But that's exactly the problem, is that the person who will have an illness, if they are not on Medicaid, non-emergency assistance, which will be factored in this public charge rule, means that they'll go to the emergency room. And that is, we've known that already, is that's a high-cost, ineffective way to get health care. That means no preventive care. That means that people will not have continuity of care, very important in mental health treatment. And it means that they will not have even long-term treatment for whatever ails them. And as we pointed out in the comments, that the Lawyers Committee, the Lawyers for Civil Rights, has filed comments joined by health centers and community groups. What will happen is this will increase the healthcare costs, not just for the individual healthcare center and hospital, but for us all, and will make certain groups less healthy, particularly children, and that makes us all less healthy.
Lauren, try to put this into perspective. As you've indicated, we already have regulations about immigrants becoming a public charge or a burden on the taxpayers. Explain, how much of a difference does this amount to?
Why this makes a big difference in the view of groups like Lawyers for Civil Rights is that it has spurned fear across the immigrant communities. Our constituents hear that food stamps or Medicaid are being targeted and they panic. They think, I now have to choose between life-saving benefits for myself and my family or having immigration protection that can mean I never get deported or that I never get separated from my children. And so the broad swath of benefits that are covered mean that we see folks turning away from any kind of government assistance, not turning up to appointments, not even coming to community meetings where they could hear about the kind of benefits that are being covered. We have also seen that the Trump administration earlier this year leaked an earlier version of this proposed rule that was far more sweeping. Because that was the first contact many immigrants had with this idea of changing public charge, they panicked. And then when the actual proposed rule came out in October, for many people it was too late. They'd already disenrolled, or they'd stepped away from benefits they could otherwise have had access to. So we at Lawyers for Civil Rights really believe this is about stoking fear and causing immigrants to disenroll of their own accord.
This is being in the news, and we're talking with Laura Maslow-Armand and Laura Sampson from Lawyers for Civil Rights. Turning to Laura, as far as the policy here, I mean, lots of countries around the world say we want to be picky about which immigrants we let in. We prefer people be more affluent or more educated. What's the difference between that and I guess what you might be contending here, that there's a civil rights issue involved with this change?
It's not clear in the rule itself, or the proposed rule, what's the justification for this. This is essentially a socioeconomic regulation of immigration and of progress to citizenship. The difficulty will be getting a green card, getting the card that puts you on the path to citizenship. And so this is a way of, as other countries have tried, this is a way of changing the complexion of America in a very devious way. What's the justification? What's the reason for it? Not said in the rule, possibly said by President Trump in some of his pronouncements. This seems very particularly targeted to Central American immigration, not to immigration in general. By the way, refugees are not included in this public charge rule, nor are asylees, nor are people who are eligible for a U visa because they've cooperated with law enforcement in sexual harassment and assaults, or various other categories. It's really an immigration and an economic immigration that's targeted. I think other countries may have tried to do this, and certainly the United States tried to do it in 1921 and 24 with the Quota Act. We did try to favor England and Germany by giving them large quotas, even though they didn't want to come in, and give very small quotas to Italians that we didn't think could assimilate, and certainly
and these
Eastern
people were all
Europe
pretty poor. Before them, the Irish and the English.
Very poor, but we
Yes.
thought they couldn't assimilate. They didn't have the qualities. And that's a little bit what you see here, because as Lauren has just explained, there are factors that will be weighed in a totality of the circumstances, and that will be weighed in a case-by-case individual discretion. You're speaking English, your family has assets, you're not on public medical insurance, you're on private insurance, you don't have some long-term illness, your professional abilities, your skills are X, Y, and Z. All those will be factors that will weigh heavily on your getting that green card or you're getting admitted to the United States.
Lauren, I know probably one argument being used by supporters of these changes is that if you look at how much immigrants pay in taxes and you weigh that against what the government puts out for benefits, they say, American taxpayers are in the negative there. So, I mean, what do you say about that kind of a snapshot?
This is an important factual misconception that Lawyers of Civil Rights has worked to correct. With the exception of the elderly, immigrants of every visa category use benefits at lower rates than native-born Americans. Immigrants also pay taxes at regular rates and are unable to access many of the programs they pay to support. One prime example of this are people who are undocumented, who have taxes deducted from their income in a variety of ways, who pay sales taxes, who have payroll taxes taken out, but are unable to access the programs that they're helping to prop up. A report that came out from the Boston Planning and Development Agency looking at the impact of this proposed rule on Boston estimated that the just under 20,000 individuals who would be impacted by this rule rule contribute about $500 million to the civic life of Boston. And that's a combination of their purchasing power, the jobs they themselves are propping up, the income they bring into the city, and the taxes they pay. This rule talks about immigrants primarily as a cost. It doesn't consider the benefits that they bring to the United States.
Well, thank you both very much for being with us. Lauren Sampson and Laura Maslow-Armand from Lawyers for Civil Rights. We'll have more news in just a moment.